I never expected the most humiliating moment of my life to happen at my younger sister's engagement dinner. My mother smiled proudly as she introduced Madison to the groom family, listed every award and promotion she had ever earned, then casually pointed toward me and said I cleaned houses for a living. Before I could even react, my father laughed under his breath and added that they had stopped expecting anything from me years ago. The room went silent, and within the next hour, everything my parents had believed for the past decade would come crashing down. My name is Emily Carter, and I am 32 years old. What happened that evening was not the beginning of my story. It was simply the moment the truth finally caught up with the lies. The real story began 10 years earlier when I graduated with a business degree and decided to build something completely different from the future my parents had already planned for me. They wanted another diploma hanging on the wall. I wanted to build a business with my own hands. My mother had already enrolled me in an MBA program without asking what I wanted. She proudly told neighbors, relatives, and my father coworkers that I would continue my education. Meanwhile, I had spent months preparing a business plan for a commercial cleaning company. My research covered everything from startup costs to long-term growth. I believed I had found an opportunity that could become something extraordinary. The night I placed my proposal on the kitchen table, I expected questions. Instead, my mother refused to read a single page. She looked at me with complete disappointment and asked whether my dream was really to spend the rest of my life cleaning toilets. My father cared less about my business plan than the embarrassment it would cause him at work. He complained that he had already told everyone I was heading to graduate school. My decision made him feel foolish, and that mattered more than understanding why I believed in my idea. The only person who listened without judging me was my grandmother, Eleanor. She carefully read every page, challenged my financial estimates, and smiled when she reached the last page. Before I left, she handed me $800 from her savings, along with a small embroidered handkerchief. She told me courage would carry me farther than approval ever could. A week later, I packed my car and drove to Indianapolis with little more than determination and hope. My first apartment was tiny. My furniture barely filled the room, and my old cargo van looked like it might fall apart on the highway. Every morning, I cleaned offices before sunrise. Every afternoon, I searched for new clients. Every evening, I handled bookkeeping while wondering if I would have enough money to pay next month's rent. It was exhausting, but quitting never felt like an option because someone had believed in me when nobody else did. Months slowly turned into years. One small client became several. Then several became dozens. Every contract helped me hire another employee and improve the company. While my business grew, my relationship with my parents continued to shrink. Every phone call sounded exactly the same. My mother always asked whether I was finally ready to come home and find a respectable career. Before hanging up, she proudly talked about another promotion my younger sister had earned. My father rarely joined the conversation. His silence slowly became another reminder that he had already accepted my failure before I had even finished trying. Everything changed during my third year in business. I signed the biggest commercial contract my company had ever earned, worth hundreds of thousands of dollars every year. The agreement allowed me to open a second location and hire dozens of employees. Excited beyond words, I called home hoping my parents would finally understand what I had built. My mother laughed and asked how many people I was paying to mop floors now. Before I could answer, my father interrupted to tell me about another achievement my sister had celebrated at work. That conversation changed something inside me forever. I stopped trying to earn their approval because I finally realized they had already decided who I was. Over the next several years, my company expanded far beyond anything I had imagined. We operated across multiple states, employed hundreds of hardworking people, and serviced hospitals, universities, corporate offices, and government buildings. I treated every employee with respect because I remembered exactly what it felt like to be dismissed. Ironically, my success was never hidden. My company had a professional website, industry recognition, and business articles written about its growth. My parents simply never cared enough to look. They preferred believing I had wasted my education rather than discovering how wrong they had been. Then one afternoon, my younger sister called to announce her engagement. She invited me to the family dinner where everyone would officially meet the groom family. I almost declined until she mentioned Grandma Eleanor had specifically asked for me. That single sentence changed my mind. Before leaving, I searched the groom last name online, and in the evening arrived, and I walked into one of the nicest restaurants in the city with no expectations beyond spending a few hours with my grandmother. The private dining room was beautifully decorated, and everyone seemed excited about the engagement. My mother greeted me politely but without warmth, while my father barely looked up from his conversation. Madison hugged me, although years of distance between us made it feel slightly awkward. Grandma Eleanor smiled the moment she saw me and quietly squeezed my hand. That simple gesture reminded me that I was not completely alone, no matter how uncomfortable the evening became. As everyone settled into their seats, introductions began. My mother proudly described every relative around the table. She spoke for several minutes about Madison's career, promotions, and impressive future. When the groom family finally asked about me, my mother casually smiled and said I cleaned houses around Indianapolis. She spoke as though my life could be summarized in one dismissive sentence. Before I could respond, my father laughed softly and added that they had stopped expecting much from me years ago because I had chosen a completely different path. A few people offered polite smiles, while others looked away, clearly uncomfortable with the conversation. Before anyone could change the subject, the final guest entered the room. Catherine Bennett, the chairwoman of the property group that had become my company's largest client, walked toward the table. She greeted everyone warmly until her eyes landed on me. For a brief second, she looked surprised, then smiled with genuine respect. She walked directly toward my seat, shook my hand, and thanked me again for the incredible work my company had done over the past 18 months. My parents stared in complete confusion because they had never seen anyone greet me with that level of admiration. Catherine sat down and looked around the table before asking a simple question. She wondered why nobody had mentioned that I was the founder and chief executive of one of the fastest-growing commercial cleaning companies in the region. The room became perfectly silent. My mother quickly laughed and claimed there had been some misunderstanding. She insisted I simply cleaned homes and that Catherine must have mistaken me for someone else. Catherine smiled politely before explaining that she had personally signed a multi-million-dollar contract with my company and had attended several executive meetings with me. There was absolutely no mistake. The expressions around the table changed instantly. Madison looked completely stunned. Her fiancé family exchanged confused glances before asking whether I really owned the company responsible for maintaining many of their commercial properties. I calmly nodded and explained that my business had grown far beyond anything I imagined. We now operated in several states, employed hundreds of people, and continued expanding every year. Nobody spoke for several seconds. The same people who had pitied me only moments earlier were now looking at me with respect they had never shown before. My mother desperately tried to recover. She claimed she had always known I would become successful and insisted she had only been joking earlier. My father suddenly became interested in asking questions about my business, the number of employees, and future expansion plans. Their sudden curiosity felt hollow because it arrived only after strangers had validated my success. They had ignored every achievement for 10 years, yet now they wanted to celebrate accomplishments they had never supported. I answered politely but refused to pretend the past had never happened. Grandma Eleanor gently placed her hand over mine and smiled with tears in her eyes. She reminded everyone that success begins when just one person believes in a dream. She admitted that years earlier she had been the only member of the family willing to read my business plan, and she proudly told everyone about the $800 she had invested when nobody else believed I could succeed. Catherine admired her honesty and thanked her for encouraging someone who had gone on to create opportunities for hundreds of families through meaningful employment. When dinner ended, my mother quietly asked whether we could start over. I looked at both of my parents and realized I no longer carried the anger that had followed me for years. What remained was clarity. I told them forgiveness was possible, but pretending the past never happened was not. Respect could not appear only after success became visible. It had to exist long before the rewards arrived. I hugged my grandmother, congratulated my sister on her engagement, thanked Catherine for her kindness, and walked out of the restaurant feeling lighter than I had in years. A few weeks later, Madison called to apologize for never questioning the stories our parents had told about me. Over time, we slowly rebuilt our relationship. My parents also tried to reconnect, although trust returned much more slowly than they expected. As for me, I kept building the company, mentoring young entrepreneurs, and reminding every new employee that no honest work is ever beneath anyone. The greatest victory was never proving my parents wrong. It was proving to myself that dreams do not need permission to become reality. Sometimes the people who underestimate you become the very audience that watches your success with complete disbelief, and by then, their approval no longer matters. Immediately recognized it. His family owned one of the largest commercial property groups in the region, And 18 months earlier, my company had signed the biggest contract in its history with them. I remembered the chairwoman who approved the deal, Catherine Bennett, a brilliant business leader who respected hard work more than appearances. I had no intention of revealing anything at dinner, but I quietly wondered whether she would remember the woman who had once sat across from her in a boardroom negotiating a multi-million-dollar contract. The answer would change everything.